I should have known trouble was coming the moment I saw her standing in the doorway of my bookstore, smiling like she had every right to step back into my life. Or maybe the real shock was that my heart reacted first, flipping like it had been waiting years to remember what my mind had worked so hard to erase. Either way, fate clearly had the worst timing. The bell above the door chimed in its usual delicate way, the kind that normally comforted me on slow mornings in our quiet corner of Portland, Maine. But nothing felt ordinary when she walked in. Emma Hart. The girl I once loved so fiercely that losing her split me open in places I had never learned to mend. The girl I had promised myself I would forget. And for the most part I had been doing a damn good job. Until now. She stepped inside as if the years hadn't stretched between us, as if our last fight hadn't ended with silence sharp enough to cut. Her blonde hair was a little shorter, her skin sun-kissed like she had been living somewhere warmer, freer, far from the messy remnants of us. But her eyes, green and bright and painfully familiar, found mine almost instantly. "Mia?" she said softly, and it was ridiculous how the sound of my name in her voice felt like an earthquake and a lullaby at the same time. I swallowed, gripping the edge of the counter because it was either that, or let my knees prove just how dramatic heartbreak had made me. I had rebuilt so much since she left, starting over in this small Massachusetts town, opening my bookstore, finding a routine that felt safe, quiet, predictable. Exactly the opposite of what Emma had been. "What are you doing here?" I managed, aiming for neutral but hitting something closer to stunned and breathless. Her smile faltered, a tiny half-beat of hesitation. "I moved back," she said, "to take care of Mom. And I heard this place was yours." Of course she had. News spread fast in towns like this, carried on the wind, or maybe in the whispers of people who still remembered us as the girls who kissed behind the old church, who argued like thunderstorms and made up like summer rain. People who didn't know how spectacularly we had ended. I didn't ask her anything else. Didn't offer a smile. Didn't let myself look at her long enough to remember the way she used to trace her fingers along the edge of my jaw before kissing me. Instead, I stepped aside, letting her browse the store. But my heartbeat refused to calm. She moved slowly between the shelves, touching spines like she was greeting old friends. Emma had always loved bookstores. She used to drag me into every one we passed, insisting they each had a different soul. Watching her now felt like watching a memory I wasn't ready for. When she finally reached the poetry section, she paused. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight shift in her breathing. That shelf had been her favorite once, the place she used to recite lines to me until I learned to love the words simply because she had loved them first. She picked up a thin, worn copy of Mary Oliver. And then she opened it. And then she froze. Because inside, tucked between the pages, was the small Polaroid I had purposely never thrown away. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out. The picture was of us at 17, sitting on the hood of my old car at the edge of Blue Harbor. I was laughing at something she had said. She was looking at me, not the camera. She always looked at me like that, like I was the whole horizon and she was learning how to breathe it in. I hadn't meant for her to find it. I hadn't even known it was still there. She looked up, eyes shining with something raw and unguarded. "You kept this?" I opened my mouth, but nothing coherent came out. I didn't even know how to begin. I had built a new life around not asking questions like that. Around not reopening doors that were better left shut. I didn't know it was still in there, I said honestly. And then, because my heart was apparently suicidal, I added, "But yes, kept it." Her lips parted. Something hopeful flickered in her expression, something dangerous and too familiar. For a moment, the room felt impossibly small. I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Mia," she whispered, stepping toward me. But I wasn't ready. "Don't," I said softly. "Not yet." She stopped immediately, hurt flashing across her face before she masked it with that polite calm she always used when she didn't want me to see how deeply something affected her. "Of course," she said. We stood there for several seconds, the silence thick with all the things we weren't saying. Everything old and painful and unresolved hovered between us like dust in sunlight, visible only if you looked closely. Finally, Emma slipped the Polaroid back into the book and set it down gently. Then she walked toward the door, pausing for a second before stepping out. "Welcome back, Mia," she said without looking over her shoulder. The door closed. And the moment she was gone, the truth hit me like a wave. I wasn't over her. Not even close. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a fluke. A momentary lapse. A ghost of old feelings stirred up by the shock of seeing her again. The kind of thing anyone would experience if their first love suddenly reappeared in a bookstore like some beautifully cruel plot twist. But it didn't fade. If anything, thinking about her only made the ache sharper. I spent the morning shelving new arrivals, rearranging displays, anything to keep my hands busy. But every time the bell chimed, I startled, half expecting it to be her again. It wasn't. Not until noon. The moment I heard the soft chime, my heart stuttered. I knew it was her before I even looked up. Emma stood there holding 2 paper cups and an expression that wasn't quite a smile but wasn't neutral either. Something between apology and hope. "Coffee?" she offered. I stared. "What? You used to love hazelnut lattes. And you used to drink them at noon exactly," she said. "Old habit, I guess." I swallowed, feeling something warm and terrifying bloom in my chest. "And what do you want?" I asked. "To talk," she said quietly. "If you'll let me." I hesitated. A smarter person might have said no. A safer person definitely would have. But I had never been either of those things when it came to Emma. I nodded once. She let out a breath, relieved, and handed me one of the cups before sitting across from me at the small reading table near the window. The sunlight caught in her hair. Her eyes looked softer today, like she had slept poorly or cried a little or both. The thought made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "So," she began, fingers tapping lightly against the cup. "How long have you lived here?" "A few years," I said. "Bookstore opened about 2 years ago." "It suits you." She smiled faintly. "You always wanted something quiet. Something yours." My throat tightened because she was right. She knew me in ways no one else ever truly had. "And what about you?" I asked. Her smile faded. "California for a while," she said. "Then Boston. And now, back home, I guess." "Because of your mom?" She nodded. "She's been sick. I'm her only kid." It made sense to come back. I felt a pang of sympathy. I remembered her mother vividly. A woman who loved fiercely but demanded even more fiercely. Especially when it came to how Emma should look, act, live. A woman who tolerated me only because she didn't realize what Emma and I were. "I'm sorry," I said softly. She shrugged lightly. "Life happens." But coming back wasn't all bad. The way she looked at me suggested very clearly what she meant by that. I looked down at my hands. "Emma, we ended badly." "I know. And it hurt." "I know. So why are you doing this?" She exhaled, leaning back in her chair. "Because I thought forgetting you would be easy. Or at least possible. But I was wrong. And when I saw you yesterday, it felt like something in me woke up." I closed my eyes for a moment. "You can't just walk back in and say things like that." "I'm not trying to hurt you," she said softly. "I just want the truth between us again. Whatever form that ends up taking. The truth. God, if only it were that simple." We fell silent again. The kind that doesn't feel empty but rather impossibly full. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure I trusted my voice not to betray me. Outside, cars passed slowly along the street. People walked their dogs. Life continued in its quiet rhythm. Inside, though, everything in me felt like it was unraveling. Finally, Emma stood. "I should get going," she said. "Mom has a doctor's appointment." "But, can I see you again?" My heart kicked hard, reckless. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded, accepting it even though her eyes dimmed slightly. "Okay, then I'll hope you say yes next time." She walked to the door, then turned back with a small tentative smile. "And Mia?" "Yes. I'm really glad you kept that picture." The door closed behind her again. But this time the silence she left behind felt different. Not empty. Not painful. Expectant. Alive. And terrifying. But maybe, just maybe, in the best possible way. The next few days were like walking on a tightrope made of memories and half-forgotten laughter. Every time I went to the cafe near my bookstore, I found myself scanning the room, hoping she'd appear, hoping she hadn't forgotten to exist in this corner of my life. And every time she did, it was like a small explosion, a flare of the past igniting in the present. It happened on Thursday. I had just locked the door behind the last customer when the familiar bell chimed again. Emma. Of course it was her. She was holding a small stack of books, her green eyes brighter than I remembered, lips curved into that smile that always disarmed me. I'm doing a book drive for the local library, she said, holding the pile out to me. Thought maybe you'd want to help. I hesitated. The logical part of me, the part that had survived heartbreak and built a life around cautious routines, screamed at me to say no. But the rest of me, irrational, aching, hopelessly entangled with her, took the books. Sure, I said, my voice rougher than intended. We spent the next hour sorting through donations in the back room. It was mundane work, lifting and stacking books, marking labels. But when I looked at her, the way the sunlight through the window caught the soft waves of her hair, the subtle tilt of her head when she read a title, I felt the old pull that had defined us, that had nearly broken me. I caught her watching me more than once, and each time my chest tightened. We didn't speak about the past. We didn't have to. It hovered above us, unspoken but undeniable, like an invisible thread tying our movements, our laughter, the occasional soft curse under our breath as we navigated the cramped back room. At one point, our hands brushed while reaching for the same book. I felt my pulse spike, my stomach flip. Emma's eyes flicked up to mine, and something passed between us, recognition, longing, a silent admission that neither of us had fully moved on. We laughed nervously and then went silent, pretending nothing had happened. But the silence was filled with more than air. It was loaded with all the words we hadn't said in years, the apologies and confessions forced into silence. Afterward, she lingered by the door. I wanted to tell her to stay, to let her stay, to let the past and present collide until we could figure out what came next. But I didn't. See you tomorrow? She asked, her voice soft, almost unsure. I nodded. Yeah, tomorrow. My answer sounded too casual, but inside I was spinning. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but I knew I wanted it. Friday arrived with the same hesitation that had taken root in my chest. I found myself pacing the store before opening, rehearsing what I would say, how I would act, pretending I wasn't still in love with the girl who had haunted every quiet corner of my life for years. When the bell finally rang, I didn't need to look. I could feel her presence before I saw it. Emma, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee, smiling like she had the whole world figured out. I motioned for her to follow me to the back room. We sat cross-legged on the floor, books strewn around us, the aroma of coffee blending with the musty scent of old paper. You've changed, I said, unable to stop myself. Not in a bad way, just different. She laughed softly, a sound that made my chest ache and my stomach twist in familiar ways. You too. I mean, not the bookstore. The way you move, the way you talk. You're softer. But still the same Mia who could argue with me until the sun went down. Softness. It was not something I associated with myself. But coming from her, it felt like the most accurate reflection I'd ever heard. And somehow it cut deeper than any critique ever could. We really talked for the first time in years. About work, about the library, about her mom, about the ridiculous ways the town had changed or not. The conversation flowed easily, but underneath it was like swimming in deep water. Every laugh, every shared memory, every glance carried weight. Carried possibility. She reached out to brush a strand of hair from my face. I froze. Her fingers lingered, tracing the edge of my cheek. The contact, simple and innocent in theory, ignited something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I looked away, pretending to adjust a stack of books. I'm not ready for this, I told myself. I had built walls strong enough to survive heartbreak. And yet, every brick seemed to crumble in her presence. Emma seemed to sense my hesitation. She didn't push. Not yet. Instead, she smiled, a small, understanding smile that made my chest ache with longing. We cleaned up the mess of books together, our movements in sync, like a dance we had once known perfectly. As she prepared to leave, she lingered by the door. One hand rested lightly on the frame. Mia, she said. I looked up, heart hammering. Yes, I want to make things right. She didn't elaborate, but I understood. We both did. The weekend was a mixture of stolen moments and careful distance. I avoided running into her too much, though fate seemed determined to contradict me. At the farmer's market, she was there buying strawberries. At the little coffee shop by the pier, she appeared again, reading a tattered novel with the intensity one remembered so well. Every encounter pulled at something inside me I had tried to bury. On Sunday, she called. The sound of her voice was like sunlight breaking through clouds I didn't know had been storming for so long. Want to take a walk? She asked. I didn't hesitate this time. Yes. We walked along the waterfront, the salty breeze tangling our hair, the gulls crying overhead. We didn't talk much at first, simply walking side by side, the quiet comfortable but charged. "Do you remember our last summer together?" she asked suddenly, eyes on the horizon. "You and me, the cliff at Blue Harbor?" I nodded, smiling despite myself. How could I forget? We had been 17, fearless in our ignorance, thinking the world was small enough to fit our love. We had kissed, argued, laughed until we cried. And then, just like that, everything had changed. I turned to her. "Emma," I said, "I didn't know I'd see you again." She smiled softly. "Neither did I. But maybe we needed this. A second chance. Or at least, a chance to understand what we were meant to do with the love we once had." We talked for hours, wandering through the town, revisiting familiar streets, laughing at old jokes, recalling old fights. The air between us shifted slowly, subtly, from the cautious distance of two ex-lovers to the tentative closeness of two hearts willing to risk everything again. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and purples, I felt a warmth in my chest that hadn't been there in years. Hope. Possibility. A sense that maybe, just maybe, we could be more than what we were, without repeating the mistakes that had driven us apart. We stopped at the edge of the pier, feet dangling above the water. She leaned against me slightly, the contact light but grounding. For the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe fully without fear. "Mia," she whispered, looking up at me. "There's something I've wanted to say for a long time." "Yes," I replied softly, unsure if I wanted to hear it or not. "I love you," she said. I never stopped. Not for a day. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I had rehearsed this moment in my head countless times, but nothing had prepared me for the way it felt to hear her say it, to see the truth in her eyes, to feel it in the warmth of her hand against mine. "I love you too," I said, voice breaking slightly. I never stopped either. We sat there for a long while, simply holding on to each other, letting the water and the wind and the sky bear witness to the rekindling of something old yet new. Something tender, something fragile, something worth fighting for. The days that followed were a delicate dance of rediscovery. We learned each other again, like reading a beloved book whose pages had grown yellow with time, but whose story remained as vibrant as ever. Every touch, every glance, every laugh reminded us of what we had lost, and what we had been given a second chance to cherish. There were moments of doubt, of fear. Old wounds flared, unhealed scars, a reminder that love required patience and understanding. But with every challenge, we held tighter, communicated better, forgave more quickly. And slowly, the past became not a shadow to fear but a foundation to build upon. We were not the same girls we had been, but maybe that was the point. We had learned, grown, and now had the chance to love with eyes wide open, hearts tempered by experience yet still full of the reckless hope that had once defined us. One evening we walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, golden street lamps casting soft pools of light on the sidewalk. Emma looked at me, her smile small, intimate. "You know," she said, "I used to be terrified of losing you forever." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "Me too. But we're here now. And maybe that's what matters most." She leaned into me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I felt everything: the pain, the loss, the longing, the joy, and the unshakable certainty that love, true love, could survive even the cruelest of pasts. We stayed there, walking slowly, hearts beating in tandem, aware that life was fleeting but love, if nurtured, was infinite. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe in happily ever after, not as a distant dream but as a tangible reality unfolding with every step we took together. The following weeks felt like a delicate symphony, every note carefully played, every pause meaningful. We slipped into a rhythm neither of us expected, a gentle cadence of rediscovered love. Portland streets, once mundane and familiar, now seemed full of hidden poetry, as if the city itself celebrated our reunion. One rainy afternoon we found ourselves at my bookstore. The rain pattered softly against the windows, the world outside blurred by sheets of silver water. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through a journal I hadn't touched in years. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the musty warmth of old books. "You know," she said quietly, "I never stopped imagining this. Not just you, not just us, but this exact moment sitting here, safe together like the world can't touch us." I felt my heart tighten. Safe. Together. The words carried a weight that only made sense to someone who had loved, lost, and finally returned. I smiled at her, warmth spreading through my chest. Neither of us spoke for a long moment, because words seemed too fragile to contain the intensity of what was between us. Later, we walked through the old port. The cobblestone streets glistened under the fading rain, lanterns casting golden halos over puddles. We laughed at old memories, teasing each other about the small fights that had once seemed catastrophic. Every laugh, every shared glance was a stitch mending the fabric of what we once had, weaving something stronger, gentler, and undeniably ours. Emma reached for my hand. It was light, tentative at first, then firm as if she was anchoring herself in this present, refusing to let the past dictate her future. I intertwined my fingers with hers, surprised by how natural it felt. Natural and electric, like the culmination of 1,000 moments we had shared, some spoken, some buried deep in memory. We found ourselves by the harbor, the water reflecting the fading twilight. Boats rocked gently in their moorings, and gulls called faintly over the lull of distant waves. Emma turned to me, eyes bright and unguarded. "Do you ever think about what could have been if we didn't leave things unsaid?" she asked. Every day I wanted to tell her, but I restrained myself. I had learned that love wasn't about chasing regrets, but about embracing the present. I shook my head softly, a smile tugging at my lips. "What matters is now." Her hand squeezed mine. That's all I needed to hear. We began spending more time together, not rushing, but savoring the slow rediscovery of each other. We cooked together, laughing over burnt cookies and spilled sauce. We wandered the coastline, collecting smooth stones and shells, pretending we were kids again. Even the simplest moments, the shared silence of a rainy afternoon, the soft brushing of her fingers across mine felt monumental, brimming with intimacy and quiet joy. One evening, Emma suggested we visit Blue Harbor. The memory of that cliff, our first stolen kisses, and our teenage arguments had haunted me for years. Now, walking hand in hand toward the familiar spot, I realized it symbolized more than just nostalgia. It was a testament to resilience, a marker of love surviving despite everything. The cliff overlooked the darkening water, waves whispering against rocks below. Emma stood close to me, her hair catching the dying light, green eyes shimmering with reflection and something unspoken. "I never thought I'd be back here with you," she said softly. "Not like this." I pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. Neither of us spoke immediately. We didn't need to. The wind and waves spoke for us, carrying away old grief, old anger, old regrets. Finally I whispered, "Me neither. But I'm glad we are." She tilted her head, brushing her lips lightly against mine. The kiss was tender, exploratory, a quiet promise rather than a fiery declaration. Yet it carried everything we had ever felt: longing, forgiveness, and hope. When we pulled back, our foreheads rested together, breathing in sync, hearts echoing a rhythm we both recognized. "I want to do this right," she murmured. "Not like before." We laughed softly, the sound mingling with the ocean breeze. "That's the plan," I said. And I meant it. The days grew warmer, and with them our bond deepened. We discovered new places together: a hidden cafe tucked away in a side street, a small art gallery featuring local painters, a quiet park with a pond where ducks paddled lazily. Every corner of the city became a shared memory, a canvas for our love story to flourish without the weight of past mistakes. One Saturday morning, we took a long drive up the coast. Emma sang along to songs from our youth, laughing when I sang terribly off-key. We stopped at a cliffside lookout, watching the horizon melt into shades of pink and gold. I turned to her. "You make everything brighter," I said. She smiled, cheeks flushed from the wind. "And you make everything possible," she replied. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic proclamation. I didn't need one. Our love had endured the slow erosion of time, survived distance, heartbreak, and uncertainty. Now it was steady, real, and profoundly ours. As the sun dipped below the water, Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. We watched in silence, hearts full, souls entwined. The past had shaped us, yes, but it didn't define us. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Life continued, not without challenges, but with a newfound strength we both drew from each other. We supported Emma's mother, navigated the ups and downs of our careers, and built routines that felt comfortable and natural. We argued occasionally, as all couples do, But our arguments ended in understanding, never resentment. Every night we returned to the same quiet rhythm: coffee, conversation, soft music, and the comfort of simply being together. Our love no longer burned with the reckless intensity of youth but glowed steadily, a flame resilient against storms, nourished by patience, trust, and a deep understanding of each other's hearts. On a particularly clear evening, Emma and I sat on the roof of my bookstore, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the stars blink awake one by one. She leaned her head against mine, fingers entwined. "Do you remember when we used to dream about the future?" she asked. I smiled. "I do." "Well, I think we're living it now," she said, voice soft but filled with certainty. I nodded, resting my forehead against hers. "And it's better than I ever imagined." The night air was cool, the city quiet, yet inside everything felt alive. Alive in the way only La Vetiste endured and finally returned can make one feel. It was not perfect. It was not simple. But it was ours. We stayed there for a long while, hearts beating together, eyes tracing constellations and dreams alike. And in that shared silence I realized that love, the kind that survives the storms of life, is not measured by ease or perfection, but by resilience, patience, and the courage to come back, even when the path seems impossible. I had refused the past, tried to forget, built walls strong enough to keep her out. And yet, here she was standing, sitting, breathing, living in the spaces I had once thought belonged only to solitude. And now I would never let go. We rose together, hands still clasped, descending the roof with a quiet grace, ready to meet tomorrow, ready to continue this life we had reclaimed. The city lights flickered softly, illuminating our way, as if the universe itself nodded in approval. In the small, ordinary moments of each day, shared coffee, gentle laughter, brushing of hair from one another's face, quiet walks along the harbor, I discovered something profound. Love is not always loud, not always dramatic, not always a lightning strike. Sometimes it is the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who chooses you every day despite everything. Emma chose me. I chose her. And as we walked hand in hand toward the bookstore, hearts light, spirits buoyant, I understood at last that the happiest endings are not sudden, explosive, or perfect. They are tender, patient, and quietly beautiful, unfolding in the ordinary moments that eventually become extraordinary because they are shared with the right person. I looked at her, green eyes gleaming in the soft streetlight, and smiled. "Welcome home, Mia," she whispered. Home. The word was simple, yet it carried a weight I had never known. And in her arms, surrounded by the soft glow of a life we were building together, I understood exactly what it meant. We had refused the past, survived the pain, and rediscovered the love we thought lost. And now, at long last, it was ours. Forever. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.